All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is take number 2 of daily December 2025, number 19. Screw Windows Update. I recorded nearly an hour-long video talking about this. It got uploaded with no sound because Windows updated and it changed all my defaults, because why would I want the things that I set as defaults to remain defaults? And I was too stupid to recognize it. So we're going to try this again. So, any of you that have been existing in the US recently probably noticed that some weird stuff has been going on with TikTok. And I've been seeing a lot of just outright lies, a lot of misinformation, a lot of misunderstandings about it. So I figured I would make a video, which I already did, and there's no audio. So unless you're really good at lip reading, it's worthless. I wanted to kind of explain exactly what's been going on with TikTok, why it went down for, I have seen both 8 hours and 12 hours, but it was gone for less than 24 hours, and what it means for the future. Quick disclaimer, I am not a legal expert. I barely understand the little bit of law that I had to learn for my degree. So take all this with a grain of salt. However, I have consulted actual legal experts and have looked at a lot of other stuff. This is hopefully going to give you a better understanding of what's going on with this TikTok nonsense. So, if anyone is unaware, yesterday, TikTok went down. It just disappeared. And it has everything to do with a law that was passed, I can't remember exactly when, within the past year-ish. There was a law that went through Congress that, and this is where things get complicated. It was a law that went through Congress that they claim was written to prevent spying by the Chinese government. If that sounds crazy to you, buckle up, it's going to get crazier. And the end result, not the intended result, we're going to talk about that whole spiel later on in the video, but the end result was that TikTok was effectively banned in the US. Now, why did this happen and what's going to move forward? Well, let's figure out exactly what's going on here. So, let's go back to kind of the genesis of the law. Again, time ago, the U.S. Congress, House of Representatives, and the Senate passed this bill that they tell us was intended to stop foreign governments, particularly China, from being able to spy on U.S. citizens through an app called TikTok. Now, how in the world does that happen? Well, first of all, let's talk about TikTok in and of itself. TikTok, if you don't know, it's a short-form video app that is owned by a company that has something with the word bite in its name. I cannot remember because my brain doesn't like proper nouns. And that company is a Chinese company. Now, one of the more, let's call it interesting things about operating in China is the Chinese government has a lot more control than the U.S. government or a lot of other governments. And so one of the things the Chinese government does is they require by law, my understanding here, that companies, specifically like tech companies and things like that, build in backdoors specifically so that the Chinese government can get any and all information that they know instantly. No warrants required, nothing. Just the Chinese government wants to know something that these tech companies know, whether that's what pictures you have on your online photo sharing account, what your what text message you're sending, anything like that. Chinese government just gets to it, and it's illegal to not do that, not allow them to do that. In the U.S., we actually have laws specifically our Bill of Rights that prevents the government from doing that. I guess I should rephrase that. Is supposed to prevent the government from doing that. And they still do it. But anytime we become aware of it, it becomes a big deal. So, the thing with TikTok. TikTok gathers your information. Now, anyone that's watching this is going to go, but wait a minute, TJ. A lot of companies gather your information. Yeah, like all of them. And then they sell it to a lot of different people, including the government. And it's a very, very lucrative business. So why is TikTok different? Well, there's two main reasons why TikTok is different. One, TikTok gets a lot more information than most. If you actually look at the TOS for TikTok, or you look at all the permissions that TikTok has, TikTok doesn't just like, if you have the app on your phone, I refuse to install it on my phone because of this reason. If you have the app on your phone, basically anything that is on your phone, TikTok knows about, logs about, and can give to anybody that they want, including the Chinese government. They have access to everything in your phone, your entire contact list, all their email addresses, anything that you have stored in your phone, all your pictures, all your text, just about everything is my understanding. They have access to it. And part of the TOS, part of the terms of service for using it is basically agreeing, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Take everything that is connected to my phone in any way, shape, or form, and you can take it. They also have access to your GPS data. They can track your movements, things like that. Like, it's really bad. Now, are they the only company that does this? No, but there's limitations in other companies. Things like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but a little while back, YouTube got in some pretty hot water and got a legal spanking because not only were they tracking identifiable information about children using their app, but they were bragging about it and using it to sell ad space. Like, they were literally going to advertisers going, hey, do you want to target children with your advertisement that you're not allowed to do on literally any other platform because we consider that really underhanded? Well, not only can you target specifically children, we can pick and choose the specific children that are going to be most susceptible to your ads because we track everything that children do. And then the FTC found out about that and went, no. That's naughty. That's the reason why you can't leave comments on videos for kids and stuff like that. YouTube had to change the entirety of their website to kind of make up for the fact that not only were they tracking children, but they were bragging about it. And it's really hard to claim, we didn't know we were doing that, when you were literally going, oh yeah, we track children all the time. It's great. So US-based companies, yes, they do this. They do not do it anywhere near as much as TikTok does because they've tried and then they've gotten caught by the government. Well, why can't the government do that? Well, remember we talked about tariffs in another video where I mentioned, like, people are going, well, why don't we just tax China? Because China doesn't give a flying fuck about our laws. We can levy as many taxes as we want against China. They will never pay them. Like, that's just not what they do. They don't even observe our copyright laws. They don't observe international copyright law. That's why you can get all those weird knockoff products from China, because China only recognizes Chinese copyright. So if you violate copyright from another country, China doesn't care and they encourage it. So same thing is true here, because the app itself is not, stored, I think they have servers here. I'm not 100% certain about like infrastructure, but the app is not owned by a U.S. company. It's not controlled by a U.S. company. And while yes, you are required to follow U.S. laws if you are doing business in the U.S., international lawsuits and things like that are remarkably complex. And again, China just likes to pretend they don't exist. So they can't really they can't really take China to court like they can Google or Alphabet or Meta or Amazon or anything like that. They can do that because those companies are U.S.-based companies. They can have lots of bad stuff done to them if the government decides that they don't like them. So in order to deal with this, Congress, because again, TikTok knows everything that is on your phone and can track it all in real time. And the Chinese government, because this is how they've set up how their businesses work, they can just say at any point in time, hey, we want all that information right now. So we know where every single person that uses TikTok, that has the TikTok app on their phone, we can tell exactly where they are at any given point at any time. You can see how that might make some people a little bit worrisome, especially since if they get access to things like your camera or your microphone, they could record you without you knowing. They could spy on you. They could do a lot of different things that could be very, 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 very bad. So Congress claims they created this law to prevent the Chinese government from spying on us. Again, we will talk later about the actual purpose of this law and why all these other weird things happened because of it. But that's the justification they use, and that's the justification that they're sticking to. You know, that's the story, and they're sticking to it. So, the thing with laws in general is when a new law is passed, it can't instantly go into effect. That's just not how our legal system works. Basically, a law will be passed and there will generally be a kind of grace period for all of the different companies and people that are going to be affected by this law to have times to adjust to the new law. And another reason why stuff like that happens is anytime a new law is passed, the people that are going to be affected by it the most are going to complain. And one of the ways that they can complain is by filing lawsuits against it. Now, the U.S. government, the U.S. system of government is an absolutely fascinating apparatus because it's built with all these checks and balances. We have 3 different branches of government, and they are meant to check each other. They are meant to stop any one branch from becoming too powerful and becoming kind of tyrannical and taking more power than they're supposed to be. So our 3 branches of government, we have the legislative branch, which on the federal level is the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And they have to write and pass laws. Like, that is the entirety of their job. There's nothing else that they're supposed to do. Their entire job is just go in, write laws, get them passed so they can get signed into law by the president. The president is head of what's called the executive branch. And the executive branch job is to execute the laws. He signs them into law. That's basically all the president is supposed to do. He also makes a bunch of other decisions as well, but he's the executive. He executes things. That's what he does. He's like, okay, this is what we're doing. He's the decision maker, but he doesn't get to write laws. Only Congress can write laws, and then he gets to go, okay, I'm going to make this law go. I'm going to execute it. Now the law is going into effect. If the president doesn't want the law to happen, he can do this thing called vetoing it. That means the law doesn't become a thing. There's a check. See if Congress and the president are fighting with each other, neither one of them gets to do anything. They have to agree at least at some point. Unless you have a thing called a supermajority where they can actually overrule a presidential veto. Again, as another check and balance to prevent a president from becoming too powerful. Well, we then have this 3rd branch of government called the judicial branch. And they basically are there that whenever Congress creates a law, they get to sit there and go, wait a minute. This is a naughty law. We don't like how this law is going. Like if Congress just decided one day going, well, I have decided that I am the most important person in the world, so everybody is going to pay me $5 a day because I am wonderful and you all have to pay me. Congress theoretically could pass that law. I don't know how it would pass. But they passed that law, and for some odd reason the president was asleep and signed it accidentally. The judicial branch can go, wait a minute, this is not a good law. We will get rid of this law. It's not good. I don't know why no one in my expressions actually has an American accent, but they're fun accents. So anyway, that's the entire point of the judicial branch. However, the only way the judicial branch gets involved in something is somebody has to sue somebody. And for the federal Supreme Court, which is the tippity top of the judicial branch, the only thing that they're allowed to rule on is constitutional problems. Basically, if this law doesn't have any effect on your constitutional rights, then they don't care about it. The only thing they deal with is the Constitution. That's why it's super, super high up. So, this law that technically was banning TikTok, that's not what it does. Technically, it was banning TikTok. Got passed a little while ago, but there have been all these people suing, saying, no, you're not allowed to do this. And it has made its way up to the Supreme Court. Now, remember, I said the only reason the Supreme Court is allowed to deal with this stuff is if it has some sort of constitutional impact. And the constitutional impact that they have been focusing on is this little thing called the First Amendment. Something that's really, really fascinating about the U.S. Constitution, which if anyone outside the U.S. is not aware, actually, to be perfectly honest, there's probably quite a few U.S. citizens and U.S. residents that have no idea. The Constitution in and of itself is the framework of our government. It lays out the three branches, their responsibilities. It lays out how the entirety of our country is run. And it was written by some of the brightest minds of their time. It is an incredibly fascinating document. And one of the most interesting things about the Constitution, unlike a lot of other government forming documents, is immediately after writing the Constitution, they also wrote the first 10 amendments to it. Because the U.S. Constitution is what's called a living document. It is not meant to be set in stone. The founders understood that they were not perfect and that the document that they were creating was not perfect either. And so they actually put in these kind of safeguards to ensure that no one could use this document to become the tyrannical government that they were fleeing from, that they just spent a decent portion of human lives and suffering fighting against to gain their freedom from. So we have the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and we refer to those as the Bill of Rights. Now, at this point, we actually have 27 amendments to the Constitution. We're not talking about 28 right now. That is an entirely different video. Suffice it to say, there are currently only 27 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, no matter what some crazy dude sitting in a fancy chair says right now. Doesn't mean that's how it's going to be tomorrow, but as of right now, there are 27 amendments to the Constitution. So when we talk about the first 10 amendments, the reason that they wrote these in here was because they were all super, super important to deal with the stuff that they had just dealt with. And there are certain things, like one of the amendments that I can never remember which one. Like one of the amendments specifically deals with quartering of troops during a time of peace. Specifically says, no, you're not allowed to just put troops wherever you want. Why did they do that? Because the English government did that in an attempt to quell the resistance in the revolutionary army. They literally just started garrisoning troops in people's homes. So we have a particular amendment that says, no, you're not allowed to do that, because it was a form of tyrannical rule. It ensured that the populace knew that if they tried to rebel, that they would be crushed very, very quickly. It wasn't cool. So we have these 10 amendments. Again, we call them Bill of Rights. The First Amendment. And I'm actually going to read the entirety of it right here, because the reason it is the First Amendment, it is by far the most important of the amendments to the Constitution, because it is one of the best safeguards against a tyrannical government that can exist. So, this is the First Amendment. I'm reading this directly from constitution.congress.gov. This is the actual text. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably, the right of the people to, I'm going to try this one more time, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, the First Amendment, 9 times out of 10, when you hear people talking about the First Amendment, the only thing that they're caring about is that, or abridging the freedom of speech. Most people think the First Amendment only talks about freedom of speech. It actually doesn't. It It establishes a couple of different rights for Americans in general. Freedom of religion. Congress can't officially declare a state religion. They also can't pass laws that prevent you from exercising your own belief structure. Second, freedom of speech. Third, freedom of the press. Congress and the government are not allowed to stop the press from saying anything about them. And then the right of the people peaceably to assemble. You're not allowed to stop people from protesting you, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. We have the right to petition the government when they do something wrong. We are allowed to petition them. We are allowed to go up to them and go, hey, you guys fucked up and you need to fix it right now. That is why the First Amendment is so essential. Because if, especially, the religion thing, for some people, it's not a really big deal. For me, it is. I am a religious person. But the two biggest ones, freedom of speech and freedom of the press. If a government can prevent people from saying things negative about the government, then the government can get away with some truly horrendous things. And they have done that in the past many, many times before. And it comes out later, and then we go, well, why wasn't this a First Amendment issue? And we'll deal with that in a second. The press is the other thing. The press is supposed to be the people that bring truth to power. Their purpose is to keep the government in check. Now, they haven't been doing that particularly well recently, and I think everyone can agree. Trust in news sources in general has dropped to the lowest it has ever been in the existence of this country, because no matter which side you like to listen to, they have betrayed our trust over and over and over again. But the purpose of the press is supposed to be so that when bad things are happening, the press can tell everybody. And it goes along with that idea of freedom of speech. Well, the First Amendment is not just the First Amendment. And that's one of the other kind of interesting things about our particular form of government. There are other governments that do either similar or the exact same style of governance. And that's called what's referred to as common law. What's common law? Well, again, there's only one group that's allowed to make laws. That is Congress, the legislative branch. And there's a federal version of it. There's state versions of it as well. Like every state has their own legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch. There are state Supreme Courts. The leader of a state is referred to as the governor. And I think all states have a House of Representatives and a Senate. And the reason that we have two different houses, it's complicated, but it's really, really essential. A lot of it is to ensure that it doesn't become like a popularity contest for what bills get passed and what don't, because that turns into tyranny very, very quickly. So that being said, the First Amendment is not just the First Amendment. Every time a suit has been brought forth that has declared, hey, this is a violation of the First Amendment for whatever reason, as it goes through the courts, whenever a ruling is made, that creates what's called common law. Basically, it's not technically a law in the fact that the only laws that exist are written by Congress, either federal or state, but they have to be written by the legislative branch. No other branch is allowed to create laws. However, we can't have Congress write every single law in a way that it can always be interpreted the exact same way. Like, they would never be able to get anything done. So what happens is when the judicial branch, no matter where it is, whether we're talking about Supreme Court or some like traffic court somewhere, when they make a ruling, that becomes what's called common law. And it generally doesn't really have a force of effect until it's appealed and then reaffirmed. But once that happens, that ruling can be cited in other cases as if it was law, as if it had been written by Congress, because again, the entire purpose of the judicial branch is to interpret the law. They get to decide if something is legal or illegal, and they get to decide how it's supposed to be legal. And part of their job is interpreting what the actual intent of the law is, what the actual letter of the law is. It's one of the reasons why lawyers and judges have so much work they have to do to get to those positions, because it's remarkably complicated procedure. So anyway, there's a lot of common law around the First Amendment, and one of the big things that has been reaffirmed over and over and over again is freedom of speech does not simply mean, okay, you're allowed to say whatever it is that you want whenever you want. There are limitations to freedom of speech, and this is one of my favorite ones that everyone gets wrong. Everyone goes, well, freedom of speech isn't like it's not forever. Like, there's limits to it. Like, you can't say fire in a theater, in a crowded theater. Yes, you can. It's 100% legal to say fire in a crowded theater if it is on fire. Not only is it legal in some states, if you don't say fire in a crowded theater when it is on fire, you can actually be prosecuted. Because there are certain states that actually have laws that if you see something happening and you don't do something to stop it when you have the ability to, you actually can be found liable. It's not all the states, but there are some, and I find that fascinating. Anyway, so the First Amendment, the freedom of speech aspect has been ruled repeatedly. It doesn't just mean you're allowed to say whatever you want. It means that you're allowed to say it and people are allowed to hear it. Because the freedom of speech is completely pointless if no one can hear what you're saying. The idea of, yes, of course you have the freedom of speech. You will have the freedom of speech in this jail cell. And we will soundproof all the walls. No one will ever hear you, but say whatever in the world that you want. You have the freedom of speech. That's not real freedom of speech. And so that's been ruled over and over and over again. So that's where TikTok comes into play. So with this TikTok ban, because this has happened with a couple other things, I think there was a similar, no one ever tried to ban to Twitter, but there were similar lawsuits where they were talking about the idea of freedom of speech and what's referred to as the public square. We're not going to get into that conversation because that's remarkably complex. However, the argument effectively that was made about to TikTok is if you ban the app, then you're limiting people's freedom of speech because you are preventing them from speaking and preventing people from hearing specific speech. Again, this particular argument has been made before, and it has been ruled as a just argument. It has been ruled over and over and over again. There was one in particular, there was a senator that blocked someone on Twitter. And I can't remember who made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, but it made it pretty far. And the ruling was no. If it is an official government Twitter account where this is your official senator account, you're not allowed to block anyone because you are preventing them from hearing what it is that you're saying. Now, I personally think that was not the greatest ruling in the world because being blocked doesn't actually prevent you from reading people's tweets. It just makes it so you have to log out to read them. Like, that's the only thing that happens. But, so it's a sound argument that they made. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court because, again, this is a constitutional issue. And what happened at the Supreme Court? We got a 9-0 ruling. For anyone that doesn't follow the Supreme Court, a 9-0 ruling is nonsense. They almost never happen because the Supreme Court justices hate each other. We currently, for anyone that doesn't know, we have a Supreme Court of the United States, and it has 9 justices. With the intent of making them as unbiased as possible. When you're appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States, that is a lifetime appointment. Nothing you can do aside from being impeached. And there are very specific things that can get you impeached. Nothing else can get you removed from that. Unlike a normal judgeship, you might be appointed by someone for a specific amount of time, or a lot of judgeships, you actually have to run and get voted in. In those particular instances, if they have to make a ruling that they don't think is going to be particularly popular with their constituents, but they believe is the right way, well, now they have a bias. Because if they make the ruling that they believe is judicially correct, they might lose out on being a judge anymore. So the Supreme Court, the reason that they're life appointments is it's intended to be that they don't have to worry about making judgments that people don't like. They're never going to have to worry about, well, just because I made this judgment, I'm now no longer going to be a judge. So that's the purpose behind it. People like to name and kind of classify the judges as either conservative or liberal, and it's basically based on which president put them into the position. If a Democratic president, which is the liberal party in the U.S., appointed them, then they're a liberal judge. If a Republican president, which is the conservative branch of the U.S. parties, put them on, they're a conservative judge. We currently have, technically, we have 4 liberal judges, 5 conservative judges, and they hate each other. It is impressive just how much they are constantly arguing and squawking and complaining with each other. It's impressive. Or do we have? I can't remember. We might have 3 and 6. I can't actually remember right now. Anyway, we have a conservative majority. That I know for a fact. So, and they hate each other so much that, like, for example, if we had a dude that went and like just completely destroyed a baby, just out of nowhere decided to destroy a baby, and for some odd reason it became a constitutional thing, got all the way to the Supreme Court. If they were able to find out that that baby would grow up to be a Republican voter, we would still have a 4-5 split with Amy Coney Barrett writing the dissenting opinion. Like, they hate each other. They can't agree on anything. So how in the world did we get these people that love to talk about how everybody else on the other side is corrupt and how they're the only people that are actually the real justices, and that they're all bought and paid for and all this? How in the hell did all of them agree? It's 2 reasons. Again, we go back to that idea of what TikTok does is bad. Again, there's a reason I don't have it on my phone. I refuse to install TikTok on my phone. I didn't have a TikTok account for the longest time. I created an account only because I have a friend that uses TikTok a lot. She was streaming on TikTok and I wanted to watch the stream, and TikTok does not allow you to watch a stream without logging in. It's the only reason I have a TikTok account. I have seriously considered deleting my TikTok account because, again, it is nasty the amount of information that they gather from you. It's bad. And again, all of that information is completely open to a foreign government that is very hostile to us. So that's why all 9 of them went, yeah, this is bad. No, that's 100% a ban. Again, the Constitution is not absolute. Each one of the amendments is not absolute. There are limitations to each one. However, it is written in the Constitution. Any time there is a limitation made to a basic fundamental right, you have to do whatever the most, whatever the least invasive version of that limitation is, and it has to be the most narrowly focused version of that limitation that can exist. It cannot be overly broad. It cannot. It cannot affect too many things. You have to make it so that only in this particular incident is it limited, and you have to have an extremely good reason as to why it is limited. Generally, that limitation has to do with, if we don't limit this particular aspect, it will actually affect significantly more rights. Generally, that's the justification they'll go. It's like, yes, if we don't limit this particular thing, it will affect this right and this right and this right and this right. So by limiting this one right, we are actually protecting these 4 rights. Things like that. So interesting thing about the U.S., we actually have a right against invasive search and seizure. The government is not allowed to take our stuff. They're not allowed to spy on us. They're not allowed to investigate us unless they have a justifiable reason, which for the most part requires a warrant from a judge. Warrantless searching and stuff like that is illegal. Does that mean that it doesn't happen? Absolutely not. Again, Mark Zuckerberg is going on this like apology tour right now, talking about all the different ways that the U.S. government colluded with Facebook 100% illegally. to censor free speech, of violating people's First Amendments left and right, and finding out a bunch of information about people that they never should have had access to simply because Facebook had access to that information, because Facebook is not a government actor. They are not limited by the Bill of Rights, but as soon as they start interacting with the government, they are. It's a very complex thing. It's why nobody has gone to jail over it. So, well, there's other reasons for that as well, but that has to do with corruption. So, with the fact that we have 9 justices that hate each other, that all agree that this is bad, that means that it's 100% a good thing, right? Like that is like absolute proof that this was the right thing to do when everybody agrees. No. It's a lot more complicated than that. So why did all these people agree? I don't think the quote-unquote danger from China is really the reason that they did this. And this is not entirely my interpretation, because again, first of all, I haven't read the damn law because it's long and it's written in legalese, and that makes my brain hurt. But I follow quite a few actually different lawyers. One specifically who is a lawyer that specializes in constitutional law. They've argued before the Supreme Court before. Like, they really know what they're doing. And they were able to kind of give a breakdown of exactly what the law is. And the law itself, again, the justification that they gave for the law is we need to stop China from spying on U.S. citizens because it's a violation of their rights. And technically, yes, banning TikTok would prevent China from spying on Americans through the TikTok app. Does that mean that China can't spy on Americans? No. But it stops one avenue that they could. However, that's not the only thing the law does. The law itself was written intentionally vague and broad, and it gives the government a remarkable amount of power to basically attack anything that they don't like. And that's the biggest problem with this law. And I think that's one of the reasons why we had a 9-0 ruling from the Supreme Court, because this particular law can be used over and over and over again. In my understanding, again, I am not a legal expert. Thank you, phone. My understanding, this law can be used for a lot more than just banning TikTok. And so, as much as the Supreme Court is supposed to be unbiased, everybody knows that they're not. And this would be incredibly useful to both parties. It benefits everyone in the government, doesn't help anybody not in the government, and that's the problem with the law. It is overly broad. It is vague enough to be misinterpreted very, very easily. And I don't think all the Supreme Court justices, there's a few that I highly respect. But I think a few of the Supreme Court justices saw that particular thing and went, well, technically, and this is where it becomes kind of screwy, technically, the justification that they give is real. Again, look at the terms of service for Twitter. It's written in legalese, so it's really hard to understand, but if you read it enough times, you take the time to actually read it, they own everything on your phone and can do whatever in the hell they want with it. It's creepy. Look at the permissions that TikTok has on your phone. It's nonsense. They know all of your contacts. They know your contacts, email addresses, phone numbers, everything. It's crazy how much TikTok knows about you just from installing it on your phone, and they can track it all in real time. It's not a good thing. Does it need to be banned? Fuck no. And again, I 100% don't believe the reason that they wrote that law was to ban TikTok specifically. I believe they wrote that law to give themselves unilateral power to be able to curtail big tech, because big tech, again, Zuckerberg's gone on his apology tour showing how big tech kowtowed to the U.S. government for a long time, and they would just do whatever they were told to do, and they're not doing that anymore. And there's a few different companies right now that are starting to going, you know what? we're not going to do things simply because you told us to, because it's a violation of these people's rights, and we don't have to. And the government doesn't like that. So now they've written a law that means, oh, you don't want to play ball with us? Well, then we're going to find some reason to close your company down. Is my opinion. And again, it's not entirely my opinion. It has been formulated listening to people that understand this significantly better than I do. There are going to be tons and tons and tons and tons of challenges to that law. But due to the fact that the Supreme Court ruled the way that they did, this is a huge, huge, huge blow. And it may require Congress actually writing a new law to get rid of that law, because I don't think the judicial system is going to do anything about it, or really can anymore. Again, 9 Supreme Court justices agreeing on something is really, really rare. And it's the Supreme Court of the United States. Once they say something, that's it until another law or another challenge comes into place, possibly with a different Supreme Court. So what was going on with all the nonsense of Twitter or TikTok was gone, but now it's back and everything? That, again, in my opinion, was a publicity stunt. And it was a remarkably effective publicity stunt. There was no reason for them to just completely cancel the app for 8 or 12 hours, whatever it ended up being. There was no reason for that. Trump had already mentioned that he was going to be making an executive order, giving them basically an additional 90 days to come into terms with the law. And the way that they get past this law, again, because of how it was written, is not the company has to disband or something like that. It simply just has to not be owned by China. It cannot be owned. The U.S. version of TikTok cannot be owned by a Chinese company, because Chinese companies are owned by China. Like, you can play semantics all you want. They're owned by China. That's how their business system works. So that's the only thing that they have to do, is just not be owned by a Chinese company. And there are already negotiations in place for people looking to buy TikTok. And it was never going to go away. You want to know why? I've mentioned this many, many times before. I have a degree in marketing. What does that mean? It means I understand marketing better than some. Not even better than most, just better than some. And TikTok is marketing gold. It is so incredibly valuable. The idea that just because Congress passed a law that all of the businesses that are making shit tons of money off of TikTok advertising, we're simply going to go, well, we will go find something else to do, la-di-da-di-da. It's never going to happen. It is unbelievably valuable. The thing that's been taking so long is, first of all, they weren't sure if it was going to be a real thing, and the company that owns it's not going to sell unless they have to, because they're making shit tons of money off of it, and the Chinese government doesn't want to give it up. So there was all this kind of hoofing and hawing. People are, and it's an expensive thing. Again, it's worth its weight in gold. So it was expensive. People had to figure out who was going to buy it, who was going to deal with a backlash of buying it, because it was going to cause issues. Look what happened when Twitter got purchased. Remember how I said laws just can't instantly go into effect? Generally what happens is when a law is written, they will have this kind of grace period for people to kind of get into this new law. And then another thing that generally tends to happen is, as soon as someone challenges the law, they will put what's called, I think it's called a stay on the law. And basically what that is they go, yeah, if this legal challenge is successful, it's going to take longer than the grace period to go work its way through the courts. It doesn't make sense for us to allow this law to be enacted only for 6 months to a year later for it to get overturned, and then everybody that spent all this time and specifically money getting in line with this new law has just wasted all that time and money. So generally what will happen is there will be a stay until a final ruling can be made and all the appeals are done and things like that. Generally what happens is there's multiple stays, because like you'll have a stay until this ruling And then the ruling happens, and then someone appeals the ruling, and part of the appeal is they'll say, hey, we request to stay on this until the appeal is done. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, gets up to the Supreme Court, and then again, 9-0, folks. So the idea of, well, as soon as the Supreme Court rules on it, it instantly goes into effect was never going to be a thing. It violates a massive common law all throughout the country. It was never going to be a thing. TikTok did not have to instantly shut down like it did yesterday. It was a publicity stunt. And again, Trump had already mentioned, yeah, I'm going to extend the deadline for the purchase to go through for another 90 days because 90 days is long enough to get the majority of the work done. So it was a massive publicity stunt. It was an extremely effective publicity stunt. My theory, this is entirely my theory, I don't believe TikTok is going to go away in the U.S. in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, it's too valuable. It makes too many people, too many very rich people, too much money for it to just vanish. It's not going to happen. There might be, when the purchase actually goes through, there might be an adjustment period where it either stops working for a little bit or is taken down for a short period to basically transfer ownership. I think that's going to be the worst thing that happens. The other thing that I predict, TikTok is going to get insanely popular real quick. The publicity stunt that they pulled was basically done to terrify people. There are a lot of people who use TikTok to make a living. Now, TikTok in and of itself, my understanding is TikTok either doesn't pay its creators or doesn't pay them very well. It's not a great paycheck. It's a worse paycheck than YouTube by far, and YouTube ain't a good paycheck. However, when you use it as a marketing tool, TikTok is unbelievably valuable. It makes you lots of money. Man, my brain just blah. TikTok makes you shit tons of money when you do it effectively. Again, getting ad views and stuff on TikTok, my understanding is it really doesn't pay that well. But you can convince people to go to your Etsy shop or go to your YouTube or go to your Twitch channel or whatever it is. You use it as a marketing tool instead of just a sole income generator. You can make a shit ton of money off of it. And a lot of people do. A lot of companies advertise on TikTok because it makes lots of money. They're able to target, again, because they know everything about you, they can hyper target ads, which is extremely valuable in marketing. So TikTok is just far too valuable for it to just disappear. My prediction, it's going to be purchased, and I think if the people that buy it are smart, which I have to assume that they are, the people that buy it are smart. They're going to leverage what happened, the publicity stunt, everything. They're going to leverage it to make TikTok incredibly popular. Now, I think it's going to have the exact same effect that we've been talking about recently with these D&D channels, where YouTube got super, super popular, and streaming in general got super, super popular for a couple of years. And now it's going back to normal. And all the people that were hoping that this super popularity was never going to end are getting fucked over because they didn't diversify. So my current theory is once the purchase goes through and everything, they're going to be smart enough to leverage that. And people already are flocking to TikToks in droves because kind of the fear of missing out, FOMO stuff. And it being gone for 8 to 12 hours, like this created this intense feeling of I must experience it because it might be gone. And then as soon as it's not going to be gone anymore, it's like, oh, I feel so much better. I need it so much. I think it's going to get even more popular than it was. TikTok was already, I don't think it was the most popular social media app, but it was definitely in the top 3. I think it's going to be the most popular social media app at least for 6 months to a couple of years. And if you're really, really smart and pretty lucky as well, you might be able to leverage that into making a decent chunk of money off of it and leveraging that into starting your own business through content creation and other things like that. I think it's going to be incredibly valuable for that. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket. Do not rely on TikTok completely. It will fall. Everything will fall. MySpace used to be huge. Nobody uses it anymore. Facebook used to be the #1 social media app, and it was making billions. Remember Farmville and all those other stupid Facebook games that made shit tons of money? Yeah, none of them exist anymore. I think was it Zyga or Zynga, something like that? The people that made Farmville and all those other stupid Facebook apps? I don't believe they exist anymore. Facebook used to be absolutely essential to business. It was the #1 marketing tool. It made people billions of dollars. And now it is a complete cesspool of nothingness. Nothing lasts forever. TikTok will rise and it will fall. Do not put all of your eggs in one basket. But my theory after all this stuff went on is TikTok's going to get big. That's what I think is going to happen. And it's just entirely based on my opinion and my very, very limited knowledge of business. And as a reminder, I have not been able to work in over a decade. I am 100%. I'm 100% permanently disabled. So I'm not going to be working again. So take all my opinions with a grain of salt. You know, I worked in retail for about a decade. I was extremely good at it. But social media was never something that I made shit tons of money on. It was a hobby. It always has been a hobby. So you can decide that my predictions are complete bonkers. Don't trust me. Be careful. Don't leverage yourself into, bankruptcy just because you think TikTok's going to get big. Even if it does get big, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get in it. But that's what I think is going to happen. So, again, the whole purpose of this video, with sound this time, was to hopefully clear up a lot of the misinformation that was going around, and hopefully clue you guys into two big facts. One, the law that was passed was not about TikTok. TikTok was a happy accident. The law that was passed was basically to give the U.S. government ammunition against its enemies in big tech, in my opinion. Second, TikTok is dangerous. The amount of information that they get off of you is dangerous. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person if you use it or if you want to use it. Again, I just said that it's probably going to get really, really big. But understand, nothing, if you have TikTok on your phone, nothing on your phone is private anymore. Nothing. Not a single thing. Do you get what I am saying? Everything is up for grabs. And you have agreed to let them do that. So I hope this clears up a little bit of what was going on. Because again, I think a lot of people were confused about what happened. They're terrified about what's going to happen. I can't predict the future, but I do understand money. And I understand business. I don't think TikTok's going away. We might have another semi-shutdown for a little bit, but it won't be gone for very long because it's just too valuable. It makes people too much money to go away. Anyway, that's all for me today. This time with sound. Yeah, I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.